Hi, my name is Jennifer Howard. I am the owner of Facets Relational Care, and today I'm going to be starting a new series on the different levels of health for each Enneagram type and what that looks like. How can we know if someone is unhealthy, average, or healthy? The levels of health are is an idea that was first introduced by Don Riso and Russ Hudson. They are just another layer that's added to the Enneagram that I think helps us get a better understanding of how to more appropriately read each type. And just from a counseling perspective, I really like the levels of health because it gives an idea of how much work a person is going to need, how much attention they need. It's kind of a way to gauge where they are psychologically, so to speak. So I wanted to do this because over the past couple of series that I've done, I've had a lot of really good examples, but I haven't been able to compare healthy to healthy, average to average, unhealthy to unhealthy. And that can make it hard sometimes to find your type. So I'm hoping that this series will add a degree of clarification to that for you, okay? Because a very healthy type 3, for example, is going to look very, very different from a very unhealthy type 3. So we're going to start with Enneagram type 1 today, and I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up to the healthiest level. So we're going to start at level 9, which is the bottom. There are 9 levels of health according to Don Riso and Russ Hudson, at least in their schematic, and 9 is the unhealthiest, 1 is the healthiest. So when we're talking about a level 9 type 1, we're talking about the most disintegrated type 1 that we can have. At this level, the 1 is in all likelihood probably going to be very, very abusive. They're probably going to be in a place where they're no longer exhibiting any kind of control or restraint on their anger or resentment. They are taking absolutely everything out that they don't like about themselves or about the world on somebody else. This is the place where they're going to play the victim. I love the description that Don Riso and Russ Hudson give to a level 9-1 because they'll talk about how one of the things that's common for type 1 at this point are things like suicide attempts, severe depression, neurotic breakdowns, all kinds of things like that. And so I wanted to give you 2 examples. These are fictional examples, mind you, but I wanted to give you 2 examples of this just to consider. If you have children like me and you're exposed to Disney movies on a frequent basis, you may remember the 1990s film The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I don't know if you want to call him the villain. He was the villain in that movie, was a character named Claude Frollo, and he was absolutely a level 9 type 1 on the Enneagram. So there's a good example. Another good example is if you saw the film, I call it Les Mis. I think in French it's pronounced Les Miserables. But anyways, if you've ever seen that film, Anne Hathaway was in it, Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe's character in that film, Javert, he is a level 9 Enneagram type 1 as well. In fact, so much so that there's a point in that movie where he commits suicide. Sorry, spoiler alert if you've never seen it. I think pretty much everyone's seen it at this point, but if not, sorry about that. So that's just an example of what a type 9 would look like. Very abusive individual. We're going to go a step up, level 8. This is the point where the obsession with right and wrong really starts to set in. This is the point where for a 1, it's like they can't let it go anymore. This is the place in like Les Miserables, for example, where Javert, I think Javert in that movie kind of starts at this place. He's like at a level 8, and we just see in his pursuit of Jean Valjean throughout the film, he just disintegrates right on down into 9. He can't take it anymore, and he just throws himself off the side of the bridge, right? So we're talking about level 8 being the place where an extreme degree of obsession starts to form over what other people are doing and whether or not it fits into the schematic of the 1 at that time. Okay, very unhealthy. Level 7, this is where we start to see a lot of the dogma come into play. So I'm going to give it to you from 7 to 9. Okay, so at level 7, this is where the 1 really starts to hone in on their own dogma. At this point, they are no longer interested in hearing any outside perspectives. They're not interested in considering whether or not their view of the world and of people may be skewed. They have their idea of right and wrong, and that's what they're rolling with. They're getting really kind of set in that mindset. Then when we move on to a level 8, they're starting to get really obsessive about it. They've got this very dogmatic black and white view of the world, and they're noticing that, well, they're not just noticing, they've been noticing that there's a lot that doesn't fit into that schematic for them. And that's a problem. They're not happy about that. And so they develop kind of an obsession with correcting that. That obsession, if left unchecked, can develop into a level 9 type 1. And that's where we see the abusive behavior. They are outwardly condemning other people verbally, in public, in private. They don't care. They're calling you out on what they believe your shit is, embarrassing you, maybe even engaging in some violent behavior. I don't know. It just depends on each person how that's going to display itself. But the point is you're looking for a type 1 that's just being very condemning in their behavior. You know what I mean? Everything is your fault and you're evil and I'm good and you should be like me and so forth and so on. Maybe some narcissism getting mixed up in here as well. That could happen too. So levels 4 through 6, so 4, 5, and 6, are in what Don Riso and Russ Hudson call the average levels of health. So going into 6, we're moving up, we're getting a little bit healthier. This is where you have a 1 that they're a little bit more critical than maybe they could be. They're definitely paying more attention to what's right and wrong. And, not especially what's wrong, not so much with what you're doing right. They can kind of be pretty annoying at this point because it's like, could you just stop harping on, the stuff that you don't like? Very, very critical. Nothing makes them happy. They can find something wrong with absolutely anything in the entire world. Go up to a level 5, which is the step above that. And this is where we have a 1 that hasn't quite yet psychologically shifted the attention off of the self onto others. You should know that if you're a 1 on the Enneagram, and if you're not, you especially need to know this. 1s kind of have this inner critic that they're carrying around with them. And you need to understand, for as annoying as a 1 may be sometimes, and as much as you think they pick on you, or as much as you think they try to correct you, they are doing all of that to themselves times 100. So you're getting maybe, just like this bit of what they're giving to themselves psychologically. And so I think that kind of right between level 5 and level 6 is when we start to see that inner critic shift its attention from inside, what's wrong with me, to outside. This is what's wrong with everybody else. And it's a defense mechanism. Granted, if you have been living with a voice like that inside of your head for your entire life and it's eaten away at you the way that this voice eats away at a 1, I can understand how, if you haven't sought any help for that and if you are not giving it conscious attention to deal with it, I can see how it would be easy, especially with the stresses that come along with life naturally, how it would be easy to just completely disintegrate and keep right on falling, on down to that level 9. So that's a little bit about level 5 and level 6. To give you an example, this is a friend. I don't know if I would say friend. I used to work with a lady. She was a 1 on the Enneagram. She was probably what I would consider to be about a level 5. And I would also say this, she exemplified this perfectly. When a 1 gets to about a level 5, that's when they're really going to start to look a lot like type 6. One of the things that can make type 6 and type 1 look a lot alike is that at level 5, that's when type 1 starts to exhibit a lot of noticeable anxiety. They get real anxious about their performance. It's important to them that they don't make a mistake and that they live up to the expectations that have been put on them. They're very conscious of how they're being received and they want to make sure that they are seen in the best possible light. You know what I mean? And there's an anxiety that comes with that. And I'm telling you about my friend for this reason. She worked with me when I used to work at a police department and I was a 911 dispatcher, which I think I mentioned in a video, God, like a year ago from now, tons of videos ago. Anyways, she was another dispatcher that worked there, and so she would come and relieve me from my shift sometimes, or sometimes I would come and relieve her. And when we first hired her, I didn't know that she was a 1. I thought that she was a 6 because this is really where she was kind of sitting right at that level 5. She was so anxious all of the time, and she had a hard time carrying that anxiety. She didn't quite know what to do with it, and so she would confide in me when we were doing our shift changes because she wanted someone to talk to kind of help relieve that anxiety for her. And she was so incredibly scared that she was going to make a mistake, and she was nitpicking over every single tiny thing. Not only the stuff that she was doing, but the stuff that the officers that she was dispatching for that were on her channel, the stuff that they were doing as well. And she would critique them when it wasn't her place to critique them. She would make suggestions as to how they could do their jobs differently so that it would make her job easier for her so that she could perform at her best. And while I think that her intentions there were very honorable, because I know that as a 1, she just wanted things to be the best that they could possibly be. She saw the potential for excellence there and thought, we can't have less than this. It's just unacceptable to have less than that excellence. The problem is because she was right at that level 5, maybe mid 5, mid 6, because again, she was in that place where she was having that anxiousness about her own performance, but her attention was starting to shift on how she could correct other people in order to spare herself from having to deal with that inner critic on top of the anxiety that she's already feeling. Because she was there, I don't think that, well, I don't think, I mean, I know it didn't go across as helpful as in her mind she thought that it was. It turned out to be a very offensive thing to a lot of the people that worked with her. And over time, even myself, it got frustrating to have to listen to her talk about all of the things that the rest of us were doing wrong. And it was like she was so unaware that the biggest problem in all of these things that she was complaining about was actually her. So I just use her as an example. She wasn't a bad person at all. Again, she's a very, very well-intentioned person. One of the most well-intentioned people that I know. If I had like a giant sack and it had $1 million in it and it was cash and I had to leave it with somebody so that I could go away on a trip or something, she's one of the only people in the world that I would leave something that important to. She's one of the only people that I would give a key to my apartment and ask her to come and feed my cat if I were gone. She's one of the only people that I would trust to care for my child in my absence. You know what I mean? So she's a good person. I'm just talking about psychologically. This is what that level 5 area kind of looks like. Level 4, step up above 5, of course. At this point, this is where a 1 is starting to get just a little dissatisfied, with how things are going. They're noticing that things aren't right. And they're kind of like, this really could be better, I think. I think we could do a better job than we're doing right here. I'm not sure this is acceptable. This, I believe, is probably about the average level of health that Hillary Clinton is at. Because this is also the part where, ones, when they disintegrate a little bit and their focus starts to shift from what's right in the world and from what's fair, from what's beautiful, to the things that need to be improved on, which is what happens as a 1 disintegrates. They kind of start to take on this advocate or this crusader type of a role. They start to over time develop this, I don't like saying this, but I don't know how to say it any other way. They start to develop this whole, I don't know, God-like attitude. In other words, they start to develop a mindset where they see the world, and it's almost a very objective thing. It's not in reality. It's very subjective, but because they can emotionally detach, they've talked themselves into thinking that it's an objective perspective, which it's not. But they kind of get to this place where they're emotionally detaching, or so they think, and they're labeling things, and they're saying, well, this could be better, and this is how it was supposed to be, so that's good, but this isn't good over here. That keeps happening, and it shouldn't keep happening. That's a problem. And they start to unconsciously insert themselves as the solution for the problem. And I don't mean that they go and they solve the problems themselves, even though they will, I think, if they have to. But a lot of that has to do with telling the rest of us what we need to do to fix it, or convincing us to see things their way, that it needs to be fixed, that kind of a thing. And ones can start to get a little annoying at that point because they get real gung-ho on these ideas about things that need to be improved on, And it's kind of like, you need to let that go. This is not the time to do that in some cases. I'll give you an example. I may have mentioned in past videos where I had a supervisor. This was when I worked at the police department as well. I had a supervisor for a little while that was a 1 with 9, also an ISTJ in Myers-Briggs, and he was probably at about a level 4, I would say. I saw, kind of vacillated between level 4 and level 5. If he was having a really bad day, you could see kind of some of that 6-ish anxiety come out in him. But for the most part, I think he was right at about a level 4. And there was this period of time when I was working there that he got really hung up on this idea about in addition to being a 911 dispatcher, he wanted me to oversee the recycling of all the materials that the police department used. And so in addition to the job that I already had to do, which by the way required a lot of attention, I had to monitor this as well. And he had made a statement to me at one point about how this was not going to be an optional thing. This was going to be added to my job description, whether I liked it or not. And if it meant that I had to stay late, then I had to stay late. If that meant that I couldn't leave work on time to get to school, because I was a part-time student at that time, then that's just what it was going to have to mean. And obviously that wasn't going to work for me. I don't think that it's fair of anybody to ask that, and I'm sure that you wouldn't either. And that's just the point. I'm giving you this story to demonstrate that at about a level 4, this is where we start to see ones that are noticing things that are off. And again, he's a very well-intentioned person. He always has been. I never thought for a second that he meant anything disrespectful towards me or that he meant to be thoughtless. He saw a need. He said that, I don't know how he worded it to himself in his head, but perhaps he noticed one day and said, as a department, we're failing in, minimizing our footprint, if you will. There's more that we could be doing to be, an eco-friendly place to be, so forth and so on. And maybe that was something that meant a lot to him, as well it should, because it's an important thing. But the way that he went about that was very, very unrealistic, and in my mind was very poorly thought out, and he was very rigid in his perspective and was very unwilling to consider other options, and that's not fair to me. So that's an example of someone that's at a level 4. I can give you a fictional example here too. If you want to watch the movie, there's a movie called Dredd. It's spelled D-R-E-D-D. It's based off of a comic book series, as I understand it, although I've never seen the comic book series. But the character in this movie, they call him Judge Dredd. He is a hardcore 1 on the Enneagram, 1 with a 9 wing, ESTJ. He also is probably about a level 4 in this movie. He does a great job of kind of playing that crusader archetype. You know what I mean? That advocate, that activist. He goes through the movie, and there is the villain in this film is called the antagonist. Her name is they call her Mama. And anyways, she's an 8, and she's like a completely depleted 8. And when I do my video on levels of health with the 8, I'll try and throw her in there if I remember, so you guys can see where she would fit on that schematic. But she's a super, super unhealthy 8. She's like this mob boss, and she's killing people and doing all this terrible stuff, running this drug ring and all of this, so forth and so on. And he sets himself out, as kind of the lone wolf, because he's going to go and stop her, because that's not right, because she's breaking the law. It's I thought it was a very, very good film. If for no other reason, it's a really great case study in what a level 4 type 1 would look like. So that's just another example if it's something that you want to look into. So those are the average levels, again, going from 4 to 6. At level 4, we have a 1 that the focus is starting to shift a little bit now. It's not on what's right with the world anymore. It's on what's wrong. And there's a little sense of dissatisfaction there. It's kind of like, this could be a lot better than it is. It's just a shame that it's not as good as it could be. I think I could do something about that. And we kind of start to see that mentality form. After that, they've kind of taken on this unconscious archetypal role, if you will, of being the person that's got to fix that. This is where we start to really develop that I'm God kind of perspective. I see what's wrong. I should implement a way to fix it. And what that creates at level 5 is this anxiety. It's like, I can't make a mistake. what am I going to do if I make a mistake? I can't make a mistake. I'm the person that's supposed to get everything right. So that anxiety starts to build for a little while, and then that goes down into a level 6. And level 6, it's like they've been dealing with that anxiety for so long, they can't take it anymore. So they have to start shifting this inward look at the self and what the self is doing wrong, and they start putting it, that's when we really start putting it on everybody else. And that's when we start getting someone that is dancing really kind of on the line of intolerance. They start being a little bit more adamant about, no, this is how you failed and you need to fix it. Don't lay this at my doorstep. That kind of a person, that kind of thinking, okay? So when we get into the healthy levels, which are levels 1, 2, and 3, we're going to go on up to 3 now, okay? A level 3 type 1 is someone that is a very morally upright person. They've got a very well-defined sense of ethics, and they're very, very proud of that. And the focus is that. The focus is, this is the schematic of what it's like to be a good person. I am this good person. These are all of the things that I do. This is what should and shouldn't be done. This, I think, is, at least in the videos that I have done, this is more the type of one that I have described the most. I've given you bits and pieces, I think, but this is the type of one that I use for the most part in most of my examples. This, maybe a little bit of level 4, level 5. We've talked about some of that. Going on up to level 2, this is where ones start to turn their attention. The attention, it's on the inside, but it's like there is this spirit of love and acceptance that they carry pretty heavily on them. They're very aware of how they can help other people, and it's not that they see something bad in other people that they want to improve. It's almost like it comes from a very loving place. It's like they look at people and they say, you know, I see that you really need help with this, and I can help you with this. They're very conscientious people, if you will. They still have their really strong sense of ethics, their strong moral center that they operate around, their ideas in their head of what's going to be right and wrong for them. But it's like at this place they have a healthy understanding of the fact that these are rules that apply to them. They're not things that they can just shove onto somebody else. You know what I mean? They want to help other people and they want to help other people develop, but it's like they understand that they don't have any authority to come in and tell people exactly how to change. You know what I mean? This is the type of one that you could talk to, and it's easy for them to just toss out different perspectives to consider instead of, well, this is how you have to do it, kind of a thing. I'm going to give you an example. I have a friend of mine that I think is probably about a level 2 or a level 3 Enneagram type 1. She is a fantastic person. She gives ones everywhere a good name. And she impressed me so much one time because we were at church together, and they had this was right around the election, and they had this group of protesters that was coming to the church that we go to every weekend right around election time, and they were protesting abortion, and their whole I guess platform that they were protesting from was that they believed that churches in the United States of America were secretly funding abortion, which is an anti-Christian thing. And so therefore all the churches in America were hypocrites, and all the churches in America, you know, were going to go to hell. And it was very kind of a Westboro Baptist church dogma mentality. You know, I don't know, maybe the person that was organizing this protest, maybe they were like a level 7 Enneagram type 1, very unhealthy. That was the sort of kind of a protest that it was. And I will never forget, they had been several weeks, and the pastor had to make announcements every week, you know, from the stage to say, when you leave, just don't engage them. They had gotten physical with a couple of people and had hit some people. And I mean, it was a very out of control kind of a thing. And I'll never forget, I didn't engage them. I was scared to. You know, I'm a 6. I was like, what if I say something and they get mad at me? What if I don't know what to say? What if I make it worse? So I stayed out of it because I had no idea what to do. I just ignored them and pretend like they weren't there. And she decided one day to go out there and talk to them. And I didn't go with her. So she went out there and she talked to them, and she was out there talking to them for, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, a long time. And I watched them, and, you know, she talked to the man that was heading up the whole protest. And It seemed very peaceful. They just stood and talked to each other, very relaxed body positions. I couldn't hear any screaming from where I was standing. It didn't look like anyone had gotten aggressive at any point. When she was done talking to them, they shook hands. She thanked him for his time. He thanked her for her time. And she left and came back over to me, and we went inside, and I asked her how it went, and she said, "Oh, it was fine." And I said, they didn't seem like they were hostile or anything towards you? And she said, "No, why would they be hostile?" And I said, "Because they've been hostile with everybody that's approached them so far to talk to them." And she said, "Yeah, but it all depends on how you approach them. I can't change their mind. They're allowed to believe whatever it is that they want to believe. I just wanted to go out there and offer them a different perspective. I don't know how much they understand about the church or about the Bible. I don't know where the worldview that they have has come from or what shaped that. So I just wanted to go out and ask questions and get some information about that and talk to them, and I shared with him what I thought. I didn't make any statements saying that he should or shouldn't agree with me. And we talked, and he didn't even make any statements saying that I should or should not agree with him. He just explained why he believed what he believed and why it was important to him to protest the issue. And I thought, that was it, really? And she said, "Yeah, that's all." And then we got done exchanging ideas, and I told him I had to come back inside, and we shook hands, and I left. And that, to me, is one of the best examples that I could think of what a really healthy one looks like. Again, level 2, level 3. She just did a great job exemplifying that. So that's a story to consider in that respect. So I would say level 1, and maybe she was even acting in as a level 1, type 1 in this case. When a 1 has fully integrated and they're at their healthiest, you see someone who they're kind of like, in my mind, this is just how I see them. They're kind of like this guru that, in fairy tales and old fables, there's always like a wise person somewhere, a hermit, a guru, and they're separated from the rest of society, and you have to usually go on some kind of a long journey to seek this person out. And when you do, they give you like this really kind of wise riddle that you don't understand, and you're frustrated, and you have to almost solve the riddle as you leave and go on your journey back to society, kind of a thing. And that journey helps you understand what they were trying to teach you, and that kind of a thing. You know what I'm talking about? I feel like ones, when they're at their healthiest, they're that person. They're that hermit. They're that wise guru, fairy godmother type of a person that is really evolved, and they understand that life can't be perfect. And because they have that understanding, and because they've learned how to work with that without forcing it one way or another, they have gained this wisdom. You know what I mean? About life and about how it works and about their role in life, what they're capable of controlling and what they're not capable of controlling. And so they can dispense some of the most mind-blowing things. The same one, my friend that I was telling you about that went out and talked to that protester, she all the time on her Facebook she'll have these thoughts, and she'll post these thoughts on her Facebook, and they are such mind-blowing things. And one of the things that I love about ones in general is at this stage when they're really, really healthy, it's like they're capable of confronting the rest of us about our faults, but they can do it in such a way that I don't even know really if we recognize at first that we're being confronted about a problem. Again, they start to say things as if they're just posing new perspectives or ideas. Well, have you considered this? So she will have kind of these revelations about her own self and her own life, and she'll put them on her Facebook and she'll share them. And they're not necessarily pleasant things. They're not what we would consider to be like encouraging things or hopeful things. She doesn't say things like, he who follows his star will eventually find his heaven, which is a Dante quote. She doesn't say things like that. She will make statements that are very bold, and sometimes they're hard to hear because you're like, yeah, that's a truth about reality that I need to embrace. But she says them in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're being personally attacked. She says them in a way that makes it easy for you to swallow. So that's a characteristic of a really healthy type 1. Okay. I'm just about out of time, so I'm not going to go ahead and paint that whole picture for you, starting with 1 and working my way down to 9. But I hope I've given you some good examples, what you're looking at when you have a really unhealthy 1, an average 1, and a healthy one. Hopefully that will help you to figure out maybe, if you are or are not a 1, and if so, where you are on that spectrum. Okay, thanks.